Popote tu pale. Well, welcome back. To some, it is sibling rivalry. To others, it's an attempt to grab power. That is the contest going on between the Senate and the county governments, or the governor, so to speak. So what exactly is the power or the role of the Senate over the county governments? One of the most outspoken people about this debate is the Senate Majority Leader, Professor Kindiki, who has joined us this morning to discuss just what is going on between our Senate and our governors. Welcome. Thank you. Of course, Mutegi Njau, our resident analyst and senior editor. You are a lawyer. People have taken issue with your interpretation of the concept of separation of powers and your oversight role over county governments. In a split 1 minute, can you just sort of explain what you consider to be your oversight role, the limits, the scope?
Under Article 96(3), the Constitution says the Senate shall exercise oversight over resources allocated to counties. In Article 125, the Constitution says in discharging our work, either House of Parliament is entitled to call any person to provide information or give evidence. I can go on and cite Article 254, which requires the reports of the Auditor General to be tabled before the two houses and to the county assemblies. Article 228 on the reports of the Controller of Budget, etc., etc. In a nutshell, David, if there is a role Senate has, it is to oversight counties and county government. And I want to make it clear that those who are criticizing the Senate do not realize that protecting counties and the interests of counties involves oversighting the resources, because you can have what we call internal threats, where threats come from the county government themselves. And very quickly, finally, let me say that in our oversight, and that's what brings the difference between what the county assembly does and ourselves, the county assembly oversights the county executive, but the Senate oversights county governments, which has two arms, both the executive and the assembly. Supposing there is misappropriation of funds by the county assembly, as it happened recently in Kiambu, we are told there was a speaker who was removed simply because he spent money when he was not an authorized person to spend money. So if there is one power and one function that the Senate has, and which it must be exercised without apology, is the function of ensuring that money that goes to counties is spent well and is spent to achieve the functions of counties in Schedule 4, as opposed to achieving other things like graduates and
you mentioned something about oversighting the county assembly. How do you do that, or where do you come in?
In terms of resources, because the county
utilization of resources?
Precisely.
Through the
because
speaker,
they also have,
or through
they also spend money. They also spend money.
Yes.
It's a legislature. They also spend money. So we are supposed to ensure that that money is also spent well.
If you are playing our oversight role, and then there's a proposal to establish a development board that is going to be chaired by the senator, and they incorporate other people like members of parliament, women representatives, and the governor is the secretary. How do you then do an oversight when you are chairing meetings which are deciding about these same matters? Or you oversighting yourself?
The proposal for the county development boards does not include a proposal to exercise executive power through that board, because executive power in the county level vests with county governments headed by the governor and his executive under Article 179 of the Constitution. The purpose of that board, and many people are criticizing the amendment bill to the County Government Act to establish the board. I have not read the functions of that board. In fact, it's just a forum for leaders occasionally to meet and look at what each of the various funds that are at the grassroots level are doing in different parts to avoid duplication and wastage of resources. I'll give you a small example. If, for example, through that County Development Board Forum, the governor is able to communicate that through his government and through funds allocated to counties, they have put up a dispensary in village X. The member of the National Assembly, through a CDF, is able now to say in the same village, instead of allocating CDF money to do a dispensary, I am able to allocate money to do a cattle dip, or vice versa. In other words, it's just a forum to ensure that leaders compare notes and are able to know what
is it really just a harmless forum for leaders to compare notes, or people bring their differences, their priorities, to begin to leverage them in that meeting, whether it's on the governor's budget or on the other funds which are going to be available?
In fact, on the contrary, this board will bring discipline among the leadership. Why? Because at the moment now, there is leadership chaos in the counties. The women reps, the MCAs, the senator, the governor, the national government are now running their own independent programs, or as if, you know, oblivious of what everyone else is doing. So what we are saying through this board occasionally, and it will be meeting, I think, once every 2 months or something like that, just to compare notes. It's a forum to force leaders to work together, which is not happening now.
I guess the
right now is voluntary.
I guess the devil lies in the details. When the law eventually is passed, and what are the hidden cards that are going to be introduced in the passage of that
what
bill?
are these cards?
Seeing the strained relations between governors and senators, it's likely that the senators will try to add some powers of oversight or presiding over, prefect powers over the governors.
That would be unconstitutional.
At the lower level.
That would be unconstitutional. You cannot grant yourself powers you don't have. You cannot, for example,
under the pretext of oversight.
Not really. You cannot, for example, pretend to be a policeman if you're not. You cannot pretend to be a lawmaker if you are not a lawmaker, period. So I don't think there's any room for...
So we don't expect the following, for example, that the senator, who is the chairperson of the County Development Board, shall call meetings when any member of that board calls, requests, or, you know, such arbitrary things that confer power on the chairman that subject the governor to the power and the whims of the chairman.
In that bill, it is very clear that the board will not have executive power, because that will be unconstitutional. It is just a body for consultation and to make recommendation. And also, David, I hope when the National Assembly debates it, we can also have rooms for even further refinement of that bill, because right now we are saying that the senator chairs that board, but it's not mandatory. And I've said it even before that bill was passed. It's not mandatory. If, for example, by chairing that board, it is seen that perhaps it's creating unnecessary, you know,
hierarchy.
We have no issue. It can be chaired. We can even elect a chair. But the issue of governor chairing, again, we are not opposed to it. But the challenge it will bring is that the same person who is chairing is the one doing the implementation.
Not necessarily, because it's coordinating development by the government, but also by members of parliament, including CDFs. So it's a good consultative.
That's a non-issue.
That's a
non-issue for me. The minimums are two. Number one, there must be coordination,
right,
to avoid anarchy. Number two, leaders must be forced to work together for the people. At the moment now, every leader is doing their thing, you know, all over there in the council.
You said the decisions of the board are advisory.
They are advisory.
Which means they can be ignored.
They cannot be ignored because it's a statutory board.
But
there are so many advisory, there are so many recommendation bodies that
the county assembly can say
with reasons. With reasons. They can. For example, when the law says the president shall appoint judges on recommendation by the Judicial Service Commission.
Yes.
What it means actually is that it's true the president can actually vary or differ with the recommendation of the JSC, but when the president justifies, it cannot go very far from that recommendation unless there is a justification. So likewise, even this board, I expect that at the end of the day, you cannot compel a county government to do something that has come from a recommendation of the board, but then the county government has to justify. It's all about...
Now, that is where, Prof, the risk we are trying to avoid here is introducing uncertainties, ambiguities in the distinct functioning of the national and county governments, which are clearly spelled out in the Constitution. Once you begin to rein or bring the county government under the governor, under some sort of restrictions or guidelines or control, by saying that he has to present this budget to a board that is chaired by a senator, when is the distinction going to occur? And then that budget, or well, these are public proclamations by senators. We have not seen them in law yet, so also we are talking speculatively. But we expect the worst, seeing the trends of the senators.
Yeah, but David,
the bill has been passed.
Yes, it passed. It's now before the National Assembly, because the law says if it originates from one house, it goes to the other house.
Yes, that's the fact.
David, you see, Article 6.2 of the Constitution says that there are two levels of government, national and county government, and although they are distinct, they are interdependent and they must work on the basis of cooperation and consultation. That is a very powerful constitutional principle, which I think has been ignored, and that's why we are witnessing some of these things, where there are some even who think that counties are independent political and economic units which should be left alone by the national government altogether. So we are saying that consultation and cooperation, this board, for example, furthers that consultation and cooperation. Instead, what we are seeing is conflict and competition between the two levels of government, which is unhealthy, which is unproductive, and it will make devolution not to be a viable option. Yet, it is the last card.
But so why should the governor, before I give Mutegi a chance, why should the governor present his budget to the County Development Board?
In the spirit of cooperation and consultation. And I have said, the only legitimate...
Especially when the legislative function and the passing of budgets is the function of the County Assembly. Isn't that interference in the functioning of the County Assembly?
Interference. Why? Because...
It's okay to say present the development plan and so forth, and ideas, projects.